Welcome to another episode of Pound for Pound Box Report. We were off. Uh, no, we were after being away for a while. We're back. Special episode. Every year I try to do. Every year I try to do on at least one occasion a year an episode of Pound for Pound Box Report where it's all about the ladies, all ladies panel, all women panel discussing the sweet science. And this episode is the fourth edition of that. Ladies Love Boxing round four edition of Pound for Pound Box Report. So joining me this week, regular Gail from Communities Digital News, as well as she hasn't been on the show in a while, Francis from Four Kings Boxing. And we will have another guest join us later on in the show, another lady joining us later on in the show. What's going on, ladies?
Hey, we're glad to be here. And, we get more with one show a year. You're pretty generous, and we love it.
We do.
Yeah.
Indeed. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report of live YouTube show, blog, podcast, discussing all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns boxing, we will talk about it. If you want to find out all information regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, blog page is the place to go to. p4pboxreport.wordpress.com is the link. You want to check the right of the blog page, where to find links to find Pound for Pound Box Report all over social media, as well as links to where to find the podcast. And we're on darn near all available platforms that carry the podcast, including Spotify. We're new to Spotify. Let's get the show started. Was going to begin the show recapping Claressa Shields and Christina Hammer first super fight in women's boxing, but due to some events that took place last night, we're going to start to start the show talking Big Baby Miller. For those who are news or who have been hiding under a rock, particularly among boxing fans, last night news broke that Jarrell Big Baby Miller, who was set to fight Anthony Joshua June 1st in Madison Square Garden, tested positive for the drug GW1516 or Carterine. It is a performance-enhancing drug, very dangerous performance-enhancing drug, can lead to cancer. The second time that Miller has tested positive for a banned substance. He tested positive in 2014 during his days as a MMA fighter. I usually go to Gail first, but since Francis, it's been a while since you've been on here, I'll start with you first. One, your level of surprise. Two, what's your level of annoyance because of the stupidity of Big Baby Miller? He already tested positive once. He's going to get himself caught up again with the heavyweight titles on the line, $8 million payday. What the hell?
Oh, definitely. And then on top of that, just deny that he even knew that he took this PED is ridiculous. I was reading today in the news that he stated that he never knowingly has taken any banned substance. So I don't know what excuse he's going to come up with, but to me, I feel this fight with Anthony Joshua is the brass ring. Like, why would you put that kind of opportunity on the line, especially after months of stating that Anthony Joshua...
Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear her fine, Michael. Can you?
Uh-oh.
Did we lose Michael as well?
I think we lost Michael.
I think we lost Michael. We'll carry on without him. Hopefully he'll come on back. But yeah, I'm with you 100%. Why is he playing around with this?
I have no idea.
The brass ring couldn't be a better way to put it. He hit the lottery with this fight. Huge money fight. A fight that he's certainly an underdog in, and it wouldn't be the end of his career if he lost. It'd be crazy wild if he won. But why would he screw this up on such a big stage? Absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I lost connection there, but
we carried right on without you, Michael. But I agree with Francis. Why in the world would she call? She put it perfectly. You know, this is the brass ring for him. He's hit the lottery, and he does this. I was unaware he had been popped before when he was a kickboxer, not that long ago either, not even 5 years ago. Different type of banned substance, so he's at least switched up his game. Before it was apparently a stimulant type substance. This one I knew nothing about, had to look it up, but apparently for a while there it was a favorite of professional cyclists. And if there are any athletes who know their pharmaceuticals, it's professional cyclists. But it does seem like it's got some pretty scary side effects. But you're going to make an $8 million payday. I certainly in no way condone it, but you can get behind the psychology of a guy willing to risk his health, his long-term health, for that big a payday. You know, a big roll of the dice, I suppose. But the bigger issue is the risk the risk it puts you at for the whole fight being called off. And hello, here we are.
The irony here, ladies, is that this was the same Big Baby who, throughout the press tour here in the States, was accusing Joshua of taking performance-enhancing drugs. And here he is getting popped for it. And to Francis's point, well, I have knowingly not, blah, blah, blah. That's the same standard use we hear all the time. We don't buy when other athletes say it, and we don't buy it here. So just dumb on his part, for lack of better word. Just dumb.
Yeah, and disappointing, horribly disappointing. I mean, we hear this enough from our politicians in Washington, and I'm not getting into politics, so I'll just leave it there. But you know, who does he have to throw under the bus for this one? I haven't heard him pin it on anybody in particular or state that it was part of a regimen given to him, or anybody. No particular name calling, finger pointing. But yeah, can you imagine? Here he's been talking up trash about other guys using, and it reminds me of the childhood taunt you hear in school. Takes one to know one.
So true.
Well, let's talk what's going to happen in the aftermath. Eddie Hearn stated that Joshua is still going to fight June the 1st. He's still going to fight in MSG. The question now is, who will the replacement opponent be for Big Baby? Joseph Parker has offered he would love the opportunity. Dillian White has said, yeah, give it a chance, I'll take it. Victor Ortiz, Michael Hunter.
No. Oh, no. Victor Ortiz? I think we mean Ortiz.
Oh, not Victor. I'm sorry. Luis Ortiz. My bad. Luis Ortiz, Michael Hunter.
The audience was paying attention.
Yeah, you're right. Luis Ortiz, Michael Hunter. Those seems to be the two popular names right now. What have you been hearing, ladies, in terms of what a decision will be? And not from early word is a decision will be finalized next week.
I've only heard that Anthony Joshua wants Luis Ortiz to replace Jarrell Miller, but I haven't actually heard anything about a finalized opponent except for the opponents that you mentioned.
Yeah, those are the names that seem to be floating around, and it does seem that Luis Ortiz is at the top of the list. And because there's been the common, because he has fought Wilder, it makes for some intrigue in the fight, especially since he had such a good performance against Wilder. It's a wonderful way for Joshua to match himself up. He'd be a good draw in the New York area, which is helpful. I think I'd personally love to see him fight a rematch with Dillian Whyte, but I think that fight needs to be in the UK. I don't think there are enough American fans who know who Whyte is, much less Joshua, I'm afraid, in some places. So I think you need an opponent that will draw in the United States. So Ortiz is in that category. Hunter's in that category. I'm not sure Parker's in the category. The statement I heard from Eddie Hearn, which was very interesting, is he said, I've got a list of 16 heavyweights, who would potentially want to do this or have contacted us, and 10 of them are not feasible. So who are the other 6? That's an interesting thing. So we think Ortiz and Hunter are 2 of them. Let's say Whyte's an outside third choice. So there's 3. Who are the other 3? Well, funny, I've heard Kubrat Pulev's name bandied around, but I don't think that's going to happen. Although wouldn't that be interesting for a lot of reasons? And you have to wonder who else is out there that's feasible. Personally, although it will never happen, I'd love to see one of these young rising stars, one of these young bucks, step up and say, I'll take my shot at you, Joshua, even though it's a huge long shot. A Joe Joyce, an F.A. Agagba would be amazing. And I butchered his name, F.A. Agagba. Somebody of that nature, just really unexpected matchup. I don't think Usyk's quite ready for him, but wouldn't that be fun? But that's not going to happen. That's the plan.
Here's my question, Francis, and this can be the final word before we move on to talk other boxing matters. I hear Ortiz name being thrown roundabout. The question is, the man is 40 at least. And I say at least because you don't know how old he really is. We don't know how old he really is. At his age, can he get himself prepared in essentially 6 weeks to be ready for the likes of Joshua? Or do you think it's just a sense of desperation that he'll just take the opportunity regardless?
It's possible. It's possible that he could be ready in 6 weeks. I mean, here's the thing, though, is that he just fought in March. So I almost feel like it might be too soon for him to fight. But at the same time, he still might be in good shape and that his body may be able to bounce back, or he still might be in shape to be able to take a fight with Anthony Joshua. I guess. It's a two-sided coin.
Let's move on to going back to the regular formats, and we'll talk more news later. Recapping some fights that went down. First fight, of course, took place in Atlantic City, the most high-profile, the most visible fight of the past weekend. Women's super fight between Claressa Shields and Christina Hammer. All the belts on the line, unified, undisputed middleweight titles. What was thought to be a competitive fight coming in really didn't turn out that much, as Shields, she did this when she won the super middleweight title. When faced with the biggest test, she stepped up her game, and she certainly did that in this fight, Gail. Best performance in her career, in my opinion, as she dominated Christina Hammer. After surveying the scene in the first round, she just basically said, Hammer can only do so much. Let me put my foot on the gas and just show her what I'm really about. And she did exactly that. Terrific head movement all night. Terrific counterpunching ability. She out-jabbed Hammer, who's known for her jab. She kind of exposed Hammer for being more or less a one-handed fighter, while Shields, she brought out all the tools in the chest and outboxed Hammer, hurt Hammer. Again, thorough domination on her part. Very impressive performance by Claressa Shields.
I was incredibly impressed by her performance. True champions perform their best when they get their biggest test. And this was, in theory, her biggest test. I was also very impressed with the thoughtful way she went about putting the fight together, saying that in the first round, she was calculating. She was calculating. She was watching. She was asking and answering questions as she watched Hammer perform, took in all the information, processed it, and then went to work. That is as intellectually solid an approach to a fight as you can get. She took her apart. She took every tool she had and rendered it useless. And I think there was more than a little psychological beatdown long before they ever stepped in the ring. Yeah, I think it appears now in retrospect, looking at the fight and watching it again, that Hammer was truly psychologically beaten before she got in the ring. I think in the end, she was afraid of what Shields could do, and with good reason. The only disappointment for some of us, and the reason why a lot of us keep clamoring for those 3-minute rounds, is would have been wonderful to see a knockout or a stoppage. But with 2-minute rounds, it is very, very difficult for the women to do that. I mean, the 2-minute rounds are in theory there because they compress the action in women's boxing. Um, I still am very firm in my conviction that the women need to fight 3-minute rounds, and the knockout ratio would go up if it did. But it was a splendid fight, good for her. She's only the second woman right now who is a unified division champion. That's a tremendous accomplishment. We've never had more than a handful of men at any point in the 4-belt era be unified champions. And, all due credit to her. Are we ready to call her the greatest woman of all time? If not right now, she is on her way. And if she's feeling a little sassy about it, a little outspoken about it, she has every right. If some of the men are bragging on themselves, if the men on the men's side of boxing, we've got the guys with the big personalities and the big mouth. It's not shit talk if you can back it up. So let her rip. I think it's great. Good for her.
Gail mentioned, Francis, that she felt that Hammer was intimidated before the fight. For me, I take a bit of a different approach. Hammer was doing a lot of little things to try to maybe try to kind of personally get under Shield's skin. But in watching the fight, Francis, to me, Hammer was intimidated during the fight. Once she couldn't win the jab, once Shields got physical with her, once Shields was able to hurt her early, hurt her in round 2 with a shot, it was like Hammer became flustered and didn't know what to do, coupled with the fact that she really didn't have a plan B. She was clueless. So you put that together, there was an intimidation for me as the fight went along, which speaks to Shields and her ability and the tactics that she employed during the fight.
Oh, I completely agree. I thought that Shields only improved as the fight continued. Uh, Even just seeing Christina Hammer's jab, it wasn't even quite as crisp as Shields. I felt that Shields really used the jab not so much as a distance finder, but as a way to set up her punches. It was more of a power jab than anything. So there's definitely some power behind the jab, and it was repetitive. She'd be throwing 4 or 5 jabs, starting out, and then follow it up, with a big right hand. It was just, I just don't think that Hammer had any answers for Shields. She did look very intimidated. She was backed up, and she wasn't able to counter. And honestly, she was rarely ever first. It was like Shields was the one that was constantly initiating the exchanges. So I don't think that Hammer, I think she was honestly just outclassed. Shields is definitely the more dominant fighter. She looked amazing.
Oh, I'm sorry. I lost connection a bit. Let's move on to talk. Well, Gail, you mentioned it. Uh, you asked the question about greatest women's boxer of all time. Claressa Shields, she called herself that during the fight. She reinforced it again after the fight. Um, is she the GOAT, as she likes to call herself?
Not yet. She could be. She absolutely could be. But she doesn't have quite enough of a career on the professional level to qualify. Certainly, her Olympic accomplishments are really impressive. But we have to remember that the women who preceded her in the field as professionals didn't have Olympic opportunities. So we don't know how a Christy Martin or an Ann Wolfe would have performed, or Lucia Riker in the Olympics. So we don't have that measuring stick. So we really have to measure them against each other as professionals. And if we do that, you know, fair or unfair to not put the Olympic record up there as well, but Shields isn't quite there yet. She's just not far along enough on her path. So it gives her a lot to aspire to. She's very ambitious. Great athletes are very ambitious and very competitive, not only with the people that they are on the field or in the ring against, but in their place in history. And she's thinking about it. I like the way that she thinks. That keeps an athlete sharp, even when the competition in front of them isn't maybe as challenging as it could be or should be. Well, then they challenge themselves, measuring themselves against history if they have to do that. I don't think she is the greatest of all time. I could make a very good case for Christy Martin. I could make a very good case for Lucia Riker. And a lot of people can make a good case for Ann Wolfe. And I've even heard crazy talk about getting Ann Wolfe back in the ring against Claressa. That would blow my head off. And if anybody saw Ann Wolfe playing the role of Artemis in the Wonder Woman movie a few years ago, she looks like she's ready to go. So, but I don't think Ann's that crazy. But it'd be fun to think about.
I mean, a younger Ann Wolfe versus.
Younger.
Oh my God!
Like
I'll say this. Shields hadn't faced anybody with that kind of power.
Yeah,
she wouldn't want to face anybody with that kind of power.
No, it'd be crazy fun. But I applaud her ambition. You know, whatever you think about what she said has any bearing, you know, in the truth or not. I like athletes, and I especially like women athletes who are that ambitious. Good for her.
Your thoughts, Francis? Is she the GOAT?
I completely agree. I think that Claressa Shields, she makes some grand statements about herself. She's very confident, but she backs up those statements. At this time, I think it's a little bit too early to call her, to say that she is the best or to be regarded as the best, especially with Katie Taylor out there right now. But right now, I think that Katie Taylor and Shields, they're both competing for the #1 spot.
Future here, ladies. Big discussion after the fights of Shields fighting unified undisputed ladies welterweight champion Cecilia Brækhus. Shields said after the fight she won her next. Simple question here: Will we see that fight? And will we see it this year?
I think you'll see it. I'm not 100% sure you'll see it this year, but it can't wait long because Brækhus is near the end of her career and time marches on. And there's nothing, no matter how good Brækhus is, she cannot, as we all learn, fight Father Time and win. So she's 13, almost 14 years older than Shields. Now, it isn't real unusual to see women's professionals in their late 30s, even in their early 40s, fighting women in their 20s, and they're forced to do it. There's just not a lot of competition at the highest ranks of each division. So a lot of these women stick around for a long, long time, past where the men would. Breckus is still in good shape. She looks good. She's got all the skills and experience in the world. Her last couple of fights, both of which have been in the United States, weren't exactly dominating performances. So she has to think long and hard how she'd approach someone like Shields. Now, she will have the advantage in that they're 2 divisions apart, so that Breckus would need to come up a division and Shields down a division to 154, which she says she's absolutely willing to do. That puts her at a slight disadvantage coming down in weight, but on fight night, she's liable to be a lot bigger than Breckus, in addition to being a lot younger. So that's a dangerous fight for Breckus, no matter how skilled she is.
Yeah, I have to agree with Gail. I do think it would be a dangerous fight for Breckus, but as she stated, I don't think that Breckus has much time left. But I do think the fight will happen. I'm not so sure it'll happen this year, but I think it will happen because there's some money to be made here, and it would be a big money fight for the both of them. So maybe not this year, but eventually.
Well, and the interesting thing is Breckus has been challenged and talked about a fight with a woman who she is friends with, Cris Cyborg.
Oh, wow.
And it would be a boxing event, shades of McGregor and Mayweather. And that'd be big money for both of them, with not a tremendous risk, really, because they're fighting somebody from across the aisle in a different sport. And it's, having seen how Mayweather and McGregor went, the older classic boxer versus the mixed martial artist, the boxer had his way on his field of play. Breckus has got to be thinking it would go exactly the same way for her and Cyborg, and they both make some big money. And then if she fights Shields on her way out for another big paycheck, those are 2 nice paychecks, 2 big visibility events for her to end her career on. Why not? So I think she'll fight Cyborg long before she fights Shields. And we probably lost Michael again. Technology problems. So my question to you, Francis, is: would you watch that fight, Breckus versus Cris Cyborg?
Oh, most definitely. That would be a very exciting fight. I actually was in Vegas a few years ago, and I saw Cris Cyborg fight on an Invicta card. And man, that woman is super, super intimidating. And she can box. I think people underestimated her boxing, but she has solid boxing skills. I really was very impressed with her boxing skills. I think that a fight with Breckus, it would be very intense, be very action-packed, and a nice back-and-forth fight. So I would love to see it.
I don't think it will happen. I think it will happen. Maybe later on this year, first quarter 2020, excuse me. But I'm with Francis on this. I think it will happen because there is money on the line. So if it's an opportunity for both ladies to make money, why not? I say, even if Breckus looks to be somewhat on the decline, and Shields has said that she will move down to 154 pounds to make that fight happen. So it would be a jump for Breckus, but not so significant that it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for her. Let's move on to some other fights here. Going to the fighter who many feel is #1 pound for pound, Vasiliy Lomachenko. I personally have Bud Crawford as my #1 pound for pound. But, if people want to put Loma up there, it is what it is. Well, he fought Anthony Crolla at Staples Centers in LA, stopped him in 4. Easy work for Loma. You can see this coming a mile away. Crolla just doesn't have the overall talent that Loma does. Afterwards, Loma hurt his hand somewhat. I'll go back to you, Francis. talk about the fight, but also talk about, I want to have a larger discussion about what's up next for Loma. Loma and Bob Arum talking up Mikey Garcia. You got Teofimo Lopez. He's been chirping, running off at the mouth, saying he wants a shot at Lomachenko. Uh, discuss the fight, but also let's get into a larger discussion about what direction will Vasiliy Lomachenko go.
Well, gee, the fight was pretty short. It only lasted 4 rounds. There were 2 knockdowns. I thought that Lomachenko looked pretty amazing. He looked great. The footwork was, as per usual, just excellent. The thing I like about Loma is that he uses his footwork to set up offensive opportunities. He's not one of those fighters that just uses his footwork to move around, to back up, just to use his footwork defensively. That's what I like about him, is that he always comes forward. He sets up some nice combinations, beautiful flurries. And I thought that's what we saw this previous weekend with Crolla. Yen came in round 4. Loma connected with a nice flurry, and Crolla was just down. He just couldn't continue. And it was a wonderful and impressive performance for Loma. In terms of the future, I would actually like to see him face Mikey Garcia. After Garcia's loss to Errol Spence, if I were Bob Arum, I wouldn't be too hesitant about putting Mikey Garcia in the ring with Lomachenko. I personally would try to pursue that fight if I was Bob Arum.
Here's the question, Gail. I'm hearing Loma talk Mikey. I'm hearing Bob Arum talk Mikey. I haven't heard Mikey recently talk Loma. And you and I, particularly you, have at times questioned the fighting spirit of one Mikey Garcia. Now, I know he moved up to welterweight to fight Errol Spence and lost, and people thought he was shooting for greatness, but still, he got paid a lot for that fight as well. And when it comes to fighting the best, the very best in his current division, in a division that he's really competitive in, you haven't always heard Michael Garcia say, I want to fight the best of the best. I want to dominate divisions. I want to rule above all in the division that you're in. So again, Gail, I'm hearing all this talk, but will it happen? And does Mikey really want it at this point?
Mikey Garcia is such an interesting story as a human being beyond being a boxer. He's from a family that is absolutely immersed in boxing. They live, eat, breathe, sleep it. They have their various talents. Robert had his time in the ring and has turned out, to be a much better trainer than he was a fighter. The father been involved in boxing for decades, and they love it. I mean, yeah, they eat it, they breathe it, they sleep it. And here's little brother, Mikey, who is the one guy in the family who's not really that interested in helping run the family business, and turns out to be by far the most talented guy in the family. And I've seen that before in families, not necessarily even in athletics, where there's one individual of the next generation who really has the skill, the talent, the feeling, the affinity for it, but not the passion for it. Mikey has always wanted to be in law enforcement. He's gone through the California Highway Patrol Academy, full academy. That is not easy, folks. If you're an athlete, it certainly helps. And wouldn't it be a tremendous thing for his community to have Mikey Garcia out there serving the public? It's a crazy thing to think about. That's really where his heart lies. But the truth is, he's got so much talent and the ability to make far more money than he ever could in law enforcement, that he can't deny it. So he had his issues, contractual fight with Bob Arum, and a lot of it in theory was about money and how he was treated and his percentages and all of that stuff, the typical contract fight. But part of me thinks he was just perfectly happy to sit it out because this is not where his great goals in life lie. But he just simply can't stay away when you've got that kind of talent. So I'm not sure how much longer he wants to stay in there. He's not going to be a Brandon Rios or a Mike Alvarado hanging on by their fingernails, taking fights long after they should. No. He'll make a few more big paychecks and he might be gone. So that to me was what the Spence fight was about. And a Loma fight's potentially the same thing. It's a lot to ask him to think about gearing up for another fight like that after just having gone through the fight with Spence. That's a little much for any of us to ask. But give the man a few more fights that are decent, competitive, but probably not that challenging. And let's see if he decides to keep that fight with Loma. I'm sure he and his team are dreading having to deal with Bob Arum. There's a lot of bad blood between them. But, when the dollars are big enough and the opportunity is big enough, somehow everybody can find a way to put those differences aside long enough to do business. So I'm sure we'll see it down the road. Other than Garcia, Lomachenko is like a lot of fighters that we see from time to time who are so good that it is really tough after a while to start finding them quality opponents. So here you have this, once again, young, brash, skilled, raw talent fighter coming up on the scene who likes to talk big and talk shit and so far has backed it up. I'd love to see him fight Teofimo Lopez. I don't think we want to see it this year, but Lopez is on the rise and then some. Top Rank needs to build up his fan base a little more, needs to give him a little more exposure, needs to shop him around in interviews and get him to fight in some different cities where people can see him. Then we've got a super, super matchup to look forward to.
There's also Richard Comey, who recently won the IBF belt, but it was a long road for Comey to win the belt, to win that title. I don't know. He really wants to face the likes of Lomachenko and probably lose that quick without making a little coin. In terms of Teofimo, Francis, I hear him but one, has he really done anything to earn it? Yeah, he's looked spectacular, but against whom? When asked about Teofimo, Lomachenko's attitude is like, who was this little pup? Who is he running his mouth? What has he done? What has he done to earn the opportunity? Why are so many folks talking about him? Teofimo Lopez is uber talented. However, I agree with Lomachenko here. Who is he talking this much trash? And his dad. Who are they? They're just young whippersnappers. I am Loma. Why do I have to entertain him? Why are you mentioning him in my presence? Your thoughts?
I have to agree. I mean, he hasn't had that many fights. Granted, he has an undefeated record, but I have to agree with Lomachenko. I think he's right. Maybe somewhere down the line, but as of right now, I don't think that he's earned the opportunity.
Oh my God, I feel like I'm ready to hear all of you say, "Get off my lawn" next. Great. Hey, you know what? If a kid's ambitious and wants a shot, and we're inclined to let him give it a try, hell, give it a try. It wasn't too many years ago where this young, ambitious, redheaded young Mexican took on Floyd Mayweather, and we all thought, okay, that's going to be a blowout. And sure enough, he lost. Look where he is now. And that loss taught Canelo Alvarez so much that he used in the next dozen fights that he had, it was absolutely the best thing he could have done, despite it being a loss.
Yeah,
And it
but I
introduced
think
him to a huge audience.
that Canelo was already a world champion and had fought some guys before he fought Floyd.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, but really, I mean, whippersnapper, come on, give
he is a
give
whippersnapper. The
the
dude is
next
21.
the next generation a chance. You know, I love the ambition of these young guys and girls. And I say, you know, if you want to invite them to step up and test themselves, you know, I'm not sure we have to worry so much sometimes about, well, did they earn it? You know, did they come up through the right channels? You know, you see this happening in the workplace when generations clash and young ambitious people with ideas want to contribute, want to play a part, and the old guard won't let them play. Well, I say let them play.
And I guess, like I say, he's talented enough, but I'm old school in that regard, and I like for fighters to kind of earn their stripes. You just get punched in the face hard at one good time before you go up and entertain the likes of Loma. But that's just me. Let's move on to fight that took place on the undercard of Lomachenko and Crolla, and I go to you, Francis. Zurdo Ramirez, current WBO super middleweight champion, moving up to 175 pounds, fought Tarmi Karpency. I believe he stopped him in 4 rounds as well. Uh, for me, Francis, I like the way that Zurdo looked in spite of fighting an inferior opponent. It's interesting. The interesting thing is that Zurdo, who had complained of making 168 pounds, but still did not rule out a possibility at staying at the weight to fight the likes of Callum Smith, recent winner of the World Boxing Super Series Super Middleweight Tournament. I believe Smith holds the WBA belt. Uh, but when we found out last week when Zurdo entered the ring, 75, he entered the ring weighing 196, 21-pound jump. So briefly talk about the fight and the follow-up question, Francis. Given the fact that Zurdo put on so much weight in between weigh-in and fight night, should he try to go back down to 168 pounds, or is it just the case that 175 is the weight for him?
I think he faces some stiff competition at light
Yeah.
heavyweight. I really do. I think it would be best for him to move back down, but 20 pounds is a huge jump. When I saw him in the ring, I didn't think that he looked as cut as I'm used to seeing. He looked a little slower, a little more sluggish. Perhaps he's been enjoying his time off too much. I don't know. Maybe he's enjoying his eating a little too much. But nonetheless, I think moving up to light heavyweight could be very dangerous for him, especially with the likes of opponents like Dmitry Bivol, even Sergey Kovalev, Arthur Beterbiev. After his performance against Karpency, I can't say that I was very impressed, and I didn't really feel that his performance would be able to stand up against the opponents that I just previously mentioned.
Interesting. I kind of like what I saw, and for me, I thought his body looked a little bit fuller. Didn't look as drawn, as emaciated as his last fight. I go to you, Gail. Your reaction to what you saw Saturday night, and I'll pose the question to you that I posed to Francis. Should Zurdo stay at 175, or should he think about going right back down to 68?
Well, he did what he was supposed to do. He did it well. He didn't look like he weighed 190 pounds to me. I mean, appearances can be really deceiving looking at somebody, and he definitely wasn't as cut as we're used to seeing, which, you know, isn't necessarily any indication of how in shape a guy is. But, you know, think about walking around your house with 20 extra pounds of weight in each hand, you know, 10 pounds in each hand, and you start walking around. You know, it sounds like not a big deal until you You've got to move around that extra weight at the amount of athletic performance you do in a boxing ring. That is not easy. That is not easy. So I'd love to see how he did over 12 rounds. What's he going to look like in round 6 or 8 or 10? And this is the problem that we have all talked about for many years about the guy at the top of the light heavyweight division right now, despite his losses, Sergey Kovalev, that his stamina has been an issue. But I don't know if Zurdo is really struggling to make 168, that it's really been tough, that he and his new trainers, who seem to have done very well by him in their first go-around together, do they feel it's diminishing his ability to train and his performance? When a guy's lead up to a fight, training for a fight becomes more about making weight than building the skill set, that's a problem. That you really shouldn't be spending the lion's share of your training trying to get weight off. You should be.
But unfortunately,
but it happens.
That's what happens all too often.
Well, and the thing is, a guy wants to fight at the lowest possible weight he can because, it leverages all the other tools he's got. He's going to be stronger at the lowest possible weight his physique can handle. But sometimes a guy just can't handle it. And Zurdo's getting up to the point of starting to be, past being very, very young, where you start realizing what kind of metabolism your DNA handed you, and maybe he can't make it. The thing is, at 168, he has less competition, Callum Smith aside. On the other hand, up at 175 at light heavyweight, the competition is much tougher for him, but the paychecks could be much bigger because there's so much more interest in that division. And I think, if anything, that is driving it. Money talks. These guys fight to make money, and when they work that hard and put themselves at that much risk, hey, being all about the paycheck, is a smart thing to do. But I think he would have a very, very tough time against the top names in the light heavyweight division. So I could see him testing himself against the likes of Shawnee Monahan, Joe Smith, Sullivan Barrera, see where he's at with some of those guys that have, sort of fallen into the less, sort of the second level guys, see where he stands and make a decision at that point. And maybe he doesn't have to decide. Maybe he goes back and forth if he's able to do it.
Yeah, because you to your point as well as Francis' point, he's going to be dealing with the big dogs, both literally and figuratively at 175 pounds, with the likes of Bivol, with the likes of Kovalev and Gvozdyk and Bertobiev and Marcus Brown, who looked very good in his last fight over Baldu Jack. Those guys are not to be played with. And at this point, given how shaky Zurdo Ramirez in the past, can it be argued that he would be underdogs against all those guys?
Oh, I think he would. I think he'd be an underdog against virtually anybody except, maybe like a guy like Shawnee Monahan. He'd probably be a favorite. I'm not sure he'd be a favorite against Sullivan Barrera at this point. You've got a guy like Isaac Chilemba that everybody in the division tests themselves against. He certainly wouldn't be, at risk really of being knocked out by Chilemba, but Chilemba gives guys fits. And you've got a lot of talent. That's a division that's very talent heavy. Both guys, rising to the top, and then the guys floating around who, still have a few fights left in them. So he's got a lot of places to go. And hey, we haven't mentioned Baldu Jack either. He's still in the mix of all these guys. He had such an unfortunate fight against Marcus Brown. There's a lot of possibilities for Zurdo in the division, but the top names right now, I just do not think he's ready for any of them for different reasons. I think they all beat him in different ways, but I think they all beat him.
I must admit, I'm a bit annoyed, ladies, and the reason I'm annoyed is because of the next fight we're going to talk about here. Uh, Main event of a DAZN card that took place in Mexico, and I'm just going to open the floor. If anyone want to jump in on this, please do. Jaime Munguia fighting Dennis Hogan, and we've often talked about the word controversy. Uh, the word robbery gets used a lot in boxing, sometimes overkill, but I think that both can apply in this fight. Uh, I don't care that Munguia is the A side. I don't care that he's the name and one of the big names of the zone. I don't care that they're talking about the possibility of him fighting lucrative showdowns at middleweight going down the road. The bottom line for me, ladies, is that uh, he lost Saturday in his home country, Mexico. I saw the fight. Uh, Hogan boxed the mess out of him. There's a regression when it comes to Munguia over the last couple of fights. He got touched a lot when he fought Takeshi Inoue, and he got touched a lot in this fight. And power dynamics be darned. Sometimes you just have to be fair, regardless of the circumstances coming in. And for me, um, the way that Dennis Hogan, was treated in this fight vis-a-vis the judges' scorecards were not fair. It was not fair. Like I said, whoever wants to jump in, please do.
I watched that fight. It was an absolute outrage that Dennis Hogan did not win that fight. I had my hopes when I started hearing the scores read that he'd at least get a draw, but it was impossible to overcome the fact this was a homecoming fight for Munguia, the A side in Monterrey, Mexico, in a full house. But Dennis Hogan boxed the socks off of Munguia. He had his way with him throughout the fight, particularly at stretches of the middle rounds and the last rounds. If Hogan had any decent power, which unfortunately he is not a heavy-handed power puncher, he's just not. But he was landing flush shots on Munguia virtually at will. His accuracy was so impressive. And it was because Munguia's defense is a problem. He hasn't had to employ it because his offensive skills have won fights for him. But he's been very lucky that nobody has unraveled his defense the way that Hogan did, who has more power and more pop in his hands, or that kid would have been face down on the floor and it would have been a very, very rude homecoming for him. He is extremely lucky that, first of all, he ended the fight on his feet. I'm surprised he did, because you start thinking, well, if Hogan keeps popping him flush as good as he's hitting him, eventually it's got to add up. But it didn't. But if you let a card go to the judges, it's out of your hands. And unfortunately, by a couple of points, Hogan lost that fight. It's an outrage. He wants a rematch, of course. And Munguia would be an idiot to give it to him, at least right now, because it wouldn't go any better for him the second time.
Your thoughts, Francis?
I actually didn't see the fight in its entirety, but I did see some highlights. And I thought that Munguia really ate a lot of punches. I was really surprised to see that. In addition to a lot of the comments that I read online about Munguia pretty much given a gift decision. So judging from what you guys have said, I assume that it was a pretty clear, it should have been a pretty clear decision the other way for Dennis Hogan.
We talk about the flaws of Jaime Munguia, his defensive flaws, and how he's hittable, to say the least. Here's the elephant in the room that I haven't heard too many folks talk about in analyzing Munguia as he is currently as a fighter. Who thought it was a wise move to bring in Robert Alcazar as a lead trainer? If you want to bring him in a secondary capacity, I get that. But to bring him in as the lead trainer, what has Robert Alcazar done for anybody ever? From the time we've known him during his days working with De La Hoya up until now. See, we can talk about Jaime Munguia's and the things that are wrong with him, but to me, that is part and parcel of who's training him. And I'm sorry, he has complete trash as a trainer in Robert Alcazar. Your thoughts?
Well, it's possible he was available and willing, and that might have been the best they could do. Like, if you look around at the elite trainers right now, a lot of them have their hands full is the problem. Now, why they don't throw Munguia down in Canelo's camp in San Diego, just as they've added Ryan Garcia and Oscar Valdez to the mix, I'm not sure what's going on there. And maybe Munguia is to the point where he doesn't want to put in the kind of remedial work that it looks like he needs to do in front of other big name guys. That's possible. He may want to be a little more isolated as he builds his skills up. He burst on the scene with a very good, lucky performance, and Oscar has leaned on him because he is very anxious to find the heir apparent to Canelo. He needs somebody on the come up under Canelo to carry the Golden Boy banner. And there's a lot of guys auditioning for it right now. He'd like it to be Munguia as a person, as a guy to work with, as a media-friendly guy, a fan-friendly guy. Munguia has all those ingredients. Now, unfortunately, he has to back it up in the ring, and he's very young, and they need to slow roll him right now. So maybe they want to hide him in a gym without a whole lot of other guys or activity or people snooping around, and kind of let him hide out and get to work. That's the reason for it. And because De La Hoya knows him. Munguia is a hand-picked talent, and this may be the reason that De La Hoya can trust Alcazar with Munguia.
Am I being too critical here, Francis?
No, I don't think so. I don't think you're being too critical at all. I really wasn't that impressed with his performance. So I actually am in agreement with your opinion.
Should we talk about Peter Quillin in the Caleb Truax fight in the weird ending, or should we move on and head to the news?
Well, we should probably give it about as much time as it got in the ring, which was, and it was.
So you have 10 seconds. No.
Well, yeah, that's about it. And I think it was the third fight of the weekend, stopped on a cut before it could get to the judges. Very disappointing. And what was really terrible about the fight, cuts happen and they did the right thing. And, I get that. It's disappointing, but you got to do those things. But geez, they dragged the damn card out so that it was way past 1 a.m. on the East Coast. People had stayed up to see the fight. They get in the ring. It's over in the second round. And they stayed up for nothing. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Any quick word on this, Francis, or are you just like, yeah?
Yeah, there's really not much to say. It ended so quickly. I can't say I was even really impressed with the fight until Truax had that enormous cut over his eye. I can't even say that I was really that intrigued by the fight. So there's really not much to say.
Of course, you got to imagine, I'm imagining bout Jackmore watching this fight. Truax gets this cut, admittedly pretty deep and bleeding pretty badly over the eye. And bout Jack's looking at it and saying, that little thing? Hell, man, suck it up.
Yeah. bout Jack with that scar was probably saying, that cut ain't shit. Look at my face. let's move on into some news here. We kind of began our recaps talking about the women's super fight between Claressa Shields and Christina Hammer. Well, it looks like, ladies, we're going to have a second super fight basically in 2 months, as it was official. The deal was signed. Katie Taylor, uh, if Shields and Breakus Shields are 1-2 in the pound for pound rankings among the ladies, Katie Taylor may be number three. BA, IBF, BO champion at lightweight. She's going to fight Delphine Persoon, who's been a long-time champion, current WBC champion at lightweight. They're going to fight June 1st on what's still to be Anthony Joshua's fight against a term opponent to be determined. Uh, Shields Hammer was for everything on the line at 160 pounds. I'll go back to you, Francis. This fight between Persoon and Taylor is for everything on the line at 135 pounds. And look, you got to give it to the ladies here. They're willing to risk it all, fight best, fighting the best. You can only applaud that. And dudes, I wish I would do the same. Your thoughts, Francis?
Oh my goodness. Well, Delphine Persoon, I don't know too much about her, but she has an extensive record. She's only a couple of years older than Katie Taylor, but she has a total of 44 fights, 18 fights coming by way of knockout, which is extensively more. She has extensively more fights than Katie Taylor. I've watched some tape of her. I think she looks very impressive, very aggressive. I do think Katie Taylor is, of course, faster, throws a lot more combinations, it's just quicker with the footwork, but I wouldn't say that Persoon is a pushover either. This should make for a very intriguing fight.
Your reaction to second super fight women's boxing, basically in a matter of 2-3 months, Gail.
I love the fact that the women are seizing the momentum and making these fights because, uh, there's strength in numbers here. And the more critical mass we can have for people seeing women's fights on big cards as a regular thing, once it stops becoming a novelty act, they'll look past that to the quality of the athletic competition, as many other women have done in sports before them and been successful in tennis, in golf. Well, why not in boxing? They can do it. Persoon's an interesting fighter. She is from that era where there were really no Olympic opportunities for them. She comes before there were women allowed to fight in the Olympics when she decided to turn pro. And so she didn't have that opportunity to gain any good exposure on the amateur level, which is why she's been a professional since 2009, toiling away in Europe, where there's a much bigger appetite for women's fighting. Cecilia Brækhus fills arenas in Europe. Persoon, other fighters on the women's side definitely have been in main events and have filled arenas in Europe. So it's been good for them. They can make a good living. And Delphine Persoon is a really good example. She has had every single fight of her career, all of those 44 fights up till June 1st, when she fights Katie Taylor. They have all been in her home country of Belgium. All of them. Belgium. She's found enough opponents to come fight on her home turf in Belgium. That's sort of amazing when you think about it. Now, she fought a high level of competition, not terrifically high. You don't see any names that you would truly recognize, but her performances have always been good. She's improved her performances, and this will be a big test for her. And this is going to be another one of those experience versus raw talent fights. But if there was anyone demonstrating pure boxing skills on the women's side, it's Katie Taylor. And this is going to be a very, very rough test for Persoon. I think in this case she'll perform better than Hammer did against Shields. But I think she's going to find out very quickly what a force of nature Katie Taylor is.
Call me crazy here, but I think that Persoon is going to give Taylor hell of a fight. I love someone with footwork. I love someone with skill. And Taylor hasn't seen anyone with the footwork and the skill coupled with the hand speed of Delphine Persoon. Does she have dynamic power? No, but I think she has enough power to keep Katie Taylor honest. I think this fight is going to go the distance, and I wouldn't be completely shocked if Persoon pulls it out. Taylor is the favorite. Um, but again, I think that Persoon is going to give Katie Taylor a tough go of this because of her, not her skill set, ladies, but because of her experience and the maturity that comes along with being a long time world champion, and you can't count that factor out, in my opinion. It's just, again, that alone is going to prove a little tough for Taylor. Let's move on. Any further commentary before I move on to other news regarding this upcoming women's showdown?
We're ready for the next topic.
Okay. Triple G has been out the ring for a while following his loss to Canelo Ramirez last, I want to say, September. When HBO decided to no longer do boxing, Triple G was essentially a free agent in terms of the television, the media television side. Recently signed a deal with DAZN and Matchroom, making his comeback to the ring against, wait for it, Steve Rolls. Steve Rolls? I understand that Triple G is coming back and they want a relatively soft opponent for what to me seems like to be an eventual third fight with Canelo. But again, ladies, Steve Rolls? Come on, really?
Well, Francis, do you think that Steve Rolls knows Tom Schwartz?
I didn't even know who Steve Rolls was prior to the announcement that he was facing Triple G.
I don't think you need to apologize for that. I think that all of us immediately consulted our Fox Rec and our Google and like, who the hell? But really, how much different is Steve Rolls fighting Golovkin than Tom Schwartz fighting Tyson Fury? Didn't we all do the same thing with Tom Schwartz? Of who the hell is that? German heavyweight, undefeated. Okay. Steve Rolls, Canadian middleweight, undefeated. Okay. I mean, it's a fight. It's a makeable fight. It gets him back in front of the fans. It gets butts in the seats. They do need to put on a decent undercard when you got a fight like that. And I detest this phrase, and I'm going to say it anyway. It is what it is. And are any of us really surprised that this is the matchup? He needs this tune-up fight. DAZN needs to put a showcase on, and good for Steve Rolls. He's willing to go for it, and may the best man win and cash that paycheck.
See, Gail, even your dog in the background is like, what the hell?
My dog Dolly is saying, I protest this. I'm not about it, and she's a boxer, so she gets it.
Indeed. Before we move on, I wanted to acknowledge some folks in the live YouTube chat. Punch for Pound, who's listening to the show. He said that, what did he say? He said, classy to just say politics and not push your views on the audience by saying it's one side or the other more to blame. That was very professional and classy. Much more than most analysts on TV. That was in discussion to our talk about Claressa Shields and some of the things that she's been saying. Also, Big Rotten Apple, in talking about Big Baby Miller, he said that I live in NYC and very disappointed Big Baby Miller. I was looking forward to him giving Joshua a good fight, although I see him losing. That is truly messed up. Yeah, messed up is putting it politely. It's effed up. Again, it's dumb on Big Baby Miller's part. It makes no sense to become the guy at heavyweight, and again, $6 million payday. Um, he was going to get the bag as well. Not just the big fight, but he was going to get the bag. And he was bragging about getting the bag beforehand. Now that's gone, just because of stupidity on his part. One more news story broke this afternoon. Murat Gassiev, former IBF cruiserweight champion, he's the guy who lost to, oh my God, the name escapes me. Help me out here, ladies. The guy who's signed to the zone and moving up to heavyweight, cruiserweight king Usyk, who lost to Usyk in the World Boxing Super Series cruiserweight finals. Well, it was announced today that Gassiev has also signed a deal with DAZN, and along with Usyk, has decided to step up to heavyweights. I'm going to make his heavyweight debut in June. Uh, any of you ladies can handle this. Only 25. What kind of future do you think that Gassiev has as a heavyweight?
I really liked Gassiev ever since I saw him as a 21-year-old on one of these weekend or show box. I forget where I first saw him. And I looked at him and I thought, damn, he sort of looks like a heavyweight or a 6'4" Golovkin in his youth. And here I find out that he's being trained by Abel Sanchez. So of course he's up in the gym with Golovkin all the time, and you could see some of the same footwork and the same way he holds himself, but he is tremendously skilled. He's extremely powerful, and he was a very big cruiserweight. I think he's 6'4". So this is a smart move. Makes sense. He has had success fairly young. So fighting at cruiserweight wasn't that tough. It's not that tough to make the weight when you're 21, 2, 3. You get to be 24, 5, 6, and it starts to be a little tougher. And maybe he's decided he'd be better off putting a little more weight on him, a little more muscle on him to move around the ring and overpower guys. Even though Usyk dominated him, you could clearly see the quality of Gassiev. He had some tremendous fights in the cruiserweight World Boxing Super Series tournament. So I'm excited to see him move up to heavyweight and become part of this next generation wave that's coming up. And they're all very much, for the most part, in that tall, big wingspan mode of fighter, not the square, short, blocky guys. So they're all going to give each other a good run. There's lots of good competition for him, and probably bigger paychecks than he could get at cruiserweight. So it's a very smart thing for him to do.
Given the kind of chaotic state of the heavyweight division right now, Francis, you just don't know where anybody's going. Wilder in the situation with Showtime fighting Brazil. No real clarification on his future moves after that. You got Joshua in the situation that broke with him and Big Baby last night. You got Usyk moving up. You got Dillian White. His next move is in flux, even though he's been number one contender. You don't know where he's going. Your reaction to Garcia's moves to move to heavyweight in an odd way? It doesn't make sense for him to move up, given again the situation at heavyweight seems to be in flux.
I think he's a big and powerful guy. I think he would do well at heavyweight, to be quite honest. I don't know if he's good enough to compete against someone like Anthony Joshua, but I think that he is definitely athletic for a big guy. So his decision to move up to heavyweight, I feel, is a good one.
And, it occurs to me as I'm sitting here, we're talking once again about the heavyweight division. There was one name that we failed to bring up, talking about the Joshua Big Baby debacle as a potential stand-in that makes some sense. And it's Miller's longtime friend, stablemate, and fellow New York heavyweight Adam Konaki, the Polish-born, Brooklyn-based fighter who's got a tremendous following in New York. He's available. He's a possibility. He does put butts in the seats, and it would be such a strange twist of fate to have these two guys, Adam Konaki and Jarrell Miller, who've trained together, who've sparred together, who are friends, have Adam benefit from Jarrell's missteps.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Technical issues on my end. Let me ask the question to Francis again. Given the chaotic situation at heavyweight, and what you don't know who's going where with Joshua, the situation with Big Baby, with Deep Wilder, he's fighting Brazil, but you really don't know his future after that. You got Dylan White, who's out there, but you don't know where he's going. Ortiz, given this fact that heavyweight division is in flux. Is it kind of strange? This, in a strange way, is this kind of a really good thing for Garcia to move up? Good timing?
I think it is great timing. Honestly, if he were to step up to fight Anthony Joshua on June 1st, he'd be like a hero in my book. I wouldn't care if he lost. It'd just be that he'd have some balls for stepping up to fight him. If he actually did.
I agree. These guys, what's wrong with being bold? Take a chance. We don't see that a lot with some of these matchups. A guy daring to be great. Even if they are a young whippersnapper, give it to them.
I agree.
One more question here. This regarding a question. Well, I'm gonna ask a question to you ladies that was asked in the chat here. News broke yesterday, maybe a couple of days ago, that I'll just read the comment and then ask the question, follow up. But Big Rotten Apple, in terms of mentioning it, Gail, you mentioned that Garcia is being trained by Abel Sanchez. Big Rotten Apple in the chat said that speaking of Abel Sanchez, I'm surprised that Joe Joyce, rising heavyweight, has left Abel Sanchez for Adam Booth. Your reaction to the news that Joe Joyce has left Abel Sanchez and is now going to be trained by Adam Booth?
I'm not horribly surprised by it, and it might have less to do with the relationship between Sanchez and Joyce, as in the difficulty for Joyce isolating himself up at the summit in Big Bear, California, which is little tiny mountain town up above Los Angeles, to train. The stable there at the summit and the field of potential sparring partners, who are willing to come up there and spend a week or two out of Los Angeles. I'm thinking a couple of things. Number one, that Joyce is having trouble getting sparring up there, which a guy at his level needs some very high quality training and sparring, especially the younger guys. And number two, that he feels perhaps the boxing scene back at home in the UK is where he needs to be. And maybe he's tired of California and wants some home cooking. And that wouldn't be the first time either for any athlete, and understandable. So it may be nothing to do with a criticism or a commentary on working with Sanchez. He may have just decided, listen, it's time for me to be at home. I need to be there. The scene is hot. A lot of my fellow British heavyweights, are making a lot of noise. There's a tremendous audience for it, and it's decided this is just where I need to be. And certainly going from Abel Sanchez to Adam Booth, he's going to get the best of two very good trainers. So that's a smart thing for him as well, to gather all of that experience from two high-class trainers at this point of his career. Can do nothing but good. And I imagine that he and Sanchez probably parted on very good terms. No harm done. Sanchez has got plenty of guys that want to work with him, so it's not like he's going to fold up shop just because Joyce left town.
I want to give a shout out to One Media in the chat. Thanks for listening to the show live. Was in a discussion with him a couple of nights ago where we had to flame someone who was talking out of pocket. So I want to thank him. He said he would try to listen to the next show, ladies, because he was very interested in listening to women talk boxing. So he decided to join us. So join us live, listening live right now from the UK. Shout out to One Media. Going to move on to break down some fights in the fight preview. Going to you, Francis. The big fight, of course, of this weekend. Terence Crawford fighting Amir Khan. Crawford defending his WBO welterweight strap. Um, the prevailing theory here is, Francis, is that Khan is the clear underdog and is going to get knocked out. The question for you, Francis, is how much of a threat do you think that Khan can and will give to Crawford before many people feel uh, that Crawford will eventually knock him out? In short, before he gets knocked out, well, how much of a challenge do you think that Khan can give Bud?
As much of a challenge as I think he gave Canelo, Khan is, at this point in his career, I feel more of a front runner. He looks pretty sharp the first few rounds. He's got a nice reach, a lot of nice attributes about his style, his hand speed. But after a few rounds, he tends to fade, right? He doesn't have the best chin. And Crawford, he takes the first couple rounds to sort of figure out his opponent, starts switching stances, and that's what makes him so elusive. So I think that Crawford's elusiveness is going to be the ultimate problem for Khan. I think if you were to ask me this question 10 years ago, maybe I would have a different answer. I think that Khan could give him problems. I think that he uses the jab very nicely, has great footwork, but he just tends to fade. And I think that those vulnerabilities that he does have, leaving himself open and such, I think will only be capitalized upon by someone like Terence Crawford. I see a late stoppage, maybe round 6, maybe round 6 or round 7, but there's just no doubt to me that Terence Crawford is going to walk away with the win.
Your thoughts, Gail?
Yeah, there's just about no better bet in boxing this week or this month than Crawford beating Khan. It's just a matter of how he does it. I had the opportunity to be on a media call this afternoon with the broadcast team, which is a rather unusual thing. Normally we don't have conversations with those guys, but in this case, you have Joe Tessitore, veteran broadcaster across many sports, including the NFL, along with Andre Ward and Tim Bradley. And they said that in the fighter meetings today, which the media teams have with the fighters in their camps prior to a fight, they had never seen Bud Crawford in mean streak mode this early, ever. That is a scary proposition, because one of the things that makes Bud so good, and several other fighters, is the ability to turn on that vicious mean streak when they need it in the ring, to get into that beast mode. And I guess Crawford mentally is already there. It's almost as if they put on a suit of armor, a mask, another personality. They become another version of themselves. Outside the ring, Terence Crawford is the nicest man you can cross paths with. He talks to fans. He takes time. He's a wonderful member of his community in Omaha. But man, do not get in front of him fight week. And apparently he also snapped at several members of the boxing media asking questions during a news conference. So Terence Crawford is in mean man mode, and Khan just has to pray to God he doesn't get caught with a shot, or he is going to be out cold. And I can still visualize being there ringside watching Canelo lay him out flat. I can only imagine what Terence Crawford is capable of. So Khan has to be incredibly careful about staying out of Crawford's range as long as he can. But I agree with what's been said here already. Crawford is going to take his time. He can be enormously patient, especially when he feels completely in control of a fight, and he usually is. And he just takes his time. He works on things. He fights from both sides, orthodox, southpaw. He feels out what it's like in the ring, and then he just moves in and he just destroys. And Khan, I think, will put up a tougher challenge than we give him credit for. Let's all remember, even though he got laid out flat by Canelo, he was winning on the cards to that point, which was a shock. He was fighting a very good tactical outside fight. The difference is Crawford will eventually swarm him and take care of business. I'm not sure it will go to the very latest rounds, but I do think it will go past the halfway mark of the fight. So I'm going to call it for the 8th round in my case.
I agree with the general prevailing theory here. Well, I will. Let me take this back. I will agree with basically what you said, Gail and Francis, that Khan may have some success early. He may land a few shots here and there, but the problem with Khan is not just the fact that he has a China chin. It's the fact that he continues to make mistakes, the same mistakes, over and over and over again in the fight. Um, to me, he's not the most intelligent fighter. He has quick feet, but he doesn't have good foot movement. If you can understand the difference. Um, and also, Bud, you talk the mean streak, but he also has high boxing IQ. Coupled with his skill set, um, this does not look good for Amir Khan at all. It's one thing with Canelo, who he's naturally faster than, but it can be argued that Bud Crawford equals him in the speed department, hand and feet. So Crawford can beat Khan in a multitude of ways. He can have Khan come to him, or he can walk down Khan. Either way, I think he's going to knock him out. I'm more leaning more towards what Francis says, mid-round, round 6, but eventually he's going to get him. He's going to catch up to him, and once he catches up to him, he's going to knock him out. Interesting fight on the undercard for me, and I'll go to you, Gail. Shakur Stevenson, who's gotten a bit of trouble here in light of a video that popped up of him putting hands on a woman, which is never a good thing. Never a good thing. He was a punk for what he did. I'll just say that right here and now. He was a punk for what he did. Well, he's getting into the ring on the undercard to fight Christopher Diaz. Diaz, highly touted at 135, leading into his fight for the WBO vacant WBO championship against Ito last year. He lost the bout. That being the case, Gail, it can be argued, in spite of that loss, that just from a pure skills perspective, this could be the toughest fight for Shakur Stevenson's career. And given the distractions that came from that video, could he be vulnerable for a possible upset here, Gail?
He could. A win begins in the mind. And we've seen fighters struggle who can't focus because they've got distractions. Think about all the discussion over the last 10 years about Manny Pacquiao's distractions. And when they're of this nature, which is so unfortunate, you hope it's a mistake they never repeat. God forbid it becomes a pattern. So the best thing he could possibly do is set this aside and use this unfortunate lesson and this bad behavior to make him realize you've got to focus. You've got to pay attention to your craft. You've got to be single-minded. You've got to not let life and distractions and people and nonsense get in the way. And there's a lot of things out there to draw a young man who's becoming famous and richer than in his wildest dreams. If he doesn't have someone strong-handed to guide him, it can get out of control pretty fast. So here you've got a guy in Diaz who I agree is definitely his toughest competition to date as a professional. His loss against Ito, is a year behind him. He's eager to get past it. He's had some tremendous competitive fights, and he's got the kind of skill set, I think, that could make it difficult for Stevenson. His boxing skills are great. He is not necessarily just strictly a toe-to-toe power puncher by any means. He's also young, fit. He's not going to gas out. He'll be very happy to take Stevenson deep into the fight. Having said that, again, it's really tough to go up against an A side like this, and let it go to the judges' cards. But if Diaz is going to get a fair shake anywhere outside of Puerto Rico, it will be New York. So I wish him well. I think it'll be a very interesting fight. And Stevenson has looked very good lately. He's shown some definite improvement in the last year after stalling a little bit out of the gate. But I think he's going to hit another plateau here. We'll see if he passes this test.
Is Stevenson susceptible here to getting upset, Francis?
Oh, definitely. I am not going to underestimate Christopher Diaz. I've seen tape of him, and I think that he has a comparably quick jab to Shakur Stevenson. There's definitely certain mechanics that he brings into the ring that will be problematic for Shakur Stevenson, specifically his jab, the distance control, and he's very aggressive inside. So, when he closes the distance, it'll be interesting to see what he does with Shakur Stevenson. And as of right now, because I saw the TMZ video, I'm not really a fan of Shakur Stevenson. I have to be honest. Not very impressed at all with what he did. So again, I'm not rooting for a loss for Shakur Stevenson, but he's not my favorite boxer at the moment.
Indeed, I can certainly,
I'll put it that way.
Certainly understandable. Certainly understandable. Also on the undercard of Crawford and Amir Khan, we mentioned this kid earlier. Gail basically accusing me of being an old man here. Teofimo Lopez, rising sensation at lightweight, fighting Edis Tatli. I'll just pose the question to both of you, whoever wants to respond first. I don't care. Is this easy work for Lopez?
Yes. I think that Tatli is not offensive enough. Fights from the outside, is just kind of a jab here, jab there kind of fighter. There is nothing about his speed or his combinations, anything about his strategy that I feel will be problematic for Lopez. But maybe I'm in for a surprise. But I see this fight going Lopez's way easily.
Same reaction, Gail?
Oh yeah, this guy. He'll present some skills. He's experienced. He's got 33 professional fights, but in 33 professional fights, he has 10 knockouts. So he is no power threat. In fact, I don't think he's had a straight up knockout, for quite a few years. So this is strictly meant to put Lopez on the fast track, back in front of a big audience. Is only 10 weeks since his last fight. Puts him in front of his hometown audience. He's out of Brooklyn. Absolutely a brilliant move by Bob Arum. I mean, whoever's standing across the ring from him is inconsequential. It does not matter. He's given this guy a nice paycheck. He'll go back home to Finland happy. That's all great. They want to see Lopez put on a show. It just takes him a couple of rounds. That's perfectly okay. This is an exercise in boxing marketing.
The three fights that I mentioned with Crawford, Khan, Stevenson, Diaz, Lopez, Tatli. There's going to be in New York, ESPN top ranked pay per view card. Well, the same night in Carson at what I still call the StubHub. Um, going to be aired on Fox. Danny Garcia making his return to the ring, fighting Adrian Granados here. I know on paper, Gail, that Granados looks like he may give Garcia a pretty decent go, but for me, I've been critical of Danny Garcia here, but I'm going to call for him to not just win, but be very impressive in doing so. I just think he has far too much for Granados. Too much skill, too much counterpunching ability. And I think the left hook, say what you want about him, the left hook is mean. Countering or leading, especially. I think that's going to be the difference. He's going to overpower this dude.
Well, that's interesting. There is a lot of difference of opinion about this fight, and there are a lot of people giving Granados his due, saying, "Oh, he could pull off the upset. Of any fight this weekend, due for an upset, that this is the one to watch." I've been very critical of Garcia myself. I think along his career, he's been given a lot of gift wins that he didn't earn. He's not always delivered the kind of fight, even in a victory, that we've hoped for. Some of them have been raw, messy, but he's getting to the point of his career where he can't shake off a loss like he has, with this couple of losses. A third loss for him would be devastating at this point of his career. So in an odd way, the stakes are fairly high for Garcia. And he does seem to perform better when the pressure is on him like this. So he's got every shot at winning, but I think Granados is not one to be overlooked. I think we'll know within a few rounds who's coming in and who's going to be able to impose his version of the game plan. Granados is speaking with a tremendous amount of confidence. So it's, I know all eyes will be trained over on New York, but this is a fight well worth watching.
See, it's that factor, and I go to you, Francis. Stakes is high for, to quote a title from De La Soul, stakes is high for Danny Garcia. If he's the fighter that he thinks he is, coming off of the Porter loss, if he wants to remain a major player at welterweight, he knows what's on the line. And if he has a sense of what is on the line, this is crossroads from him. And I think he's going to step up to the plate.
Oh, I think that you're right. That's definitely true. I root for Adrian Granados because he is from the Chicagoland area. I don't know if he'll be able to walk away with a victory against Danny Garcia. I think he's very tough, has a nice come forward style, very aggressive with his punching. And we've seen Danny Garcia fall kind of vulnerable to big punchers like Sean Porter. But I'm not so sure that Adrian Granados is going to bring the same kind of power into the ring, especially since most of his fights have been at 140 pounds.
Right.
So it's questionable. I think that he'll give him a good fight, and I think he'll keep coming forward to try to connect with Garcia. But Garcia's just a better boxer, better counter puncher, more precise with his punches. Just has the better ring IQ. So I think that the win is ultimately going to go to Danny Garcia, especially with that big counter hook that he has, unless Adrian Granados can somehow hurt him, overwhelm him with a lot of power punches and such. But for Adrian Granados, that's going to be, more risk, more reward. He's really going to have to come at him with a lot of punches and a lot of flurries to be able to connect with something big against Danny Garcia.
One last little bit of, I guess, news, if you will, before we start to shut the show down, this episode down. Once again, I want to thank everybody who joined us live on the YouTube chat. Big Rotten Apple, One Media, Powerful Punch. Ludabella is on Twitter currently as we record this show, saying that he's willing to put his charge, Junior Fa, up and coming heavyweight from New Zealand. He's willing to put his charge in there against one Anthony Joshua. He said Fa will have no problems getting prepared in the 6 weeks between now and June 1st. Your reaction to that, ladies?
Well, I like big talk. You know, what have I been saying this entire show tonight? The theme is youth will be served. You know, be bold. Give these guys a chance. You know, if a young guy, a young up and coming guy says, listen, I'll step in, I'll take it, I'll take it on, I'll test myself and see what I'm made of. You know, DeBella's based in New York. He gets along with everybody. He can work with, you know, virtually any promoter. You know, the big question is, you know, Joshua's making his first appearance in the United States, and as much of a draw as he is back home across the pond, he hasn't a proven draw here yet. They do need a little help on the B side from somebody, which is why I still lean toward a guy like Adam Konaki or Luis Ortiz as the possible opponent. But thanks, Lou.
your reaction to Lou DiBella and his words on Twitter this evening?
Oh, well, why not? His last 2 fights have been first round KOs. So if he wants the opportunity, I mean, at least we know that Fa is willing to take it. He's 17-0, undefeated.
And we're all talking about the Joshua, you know, fight in the Miller meltdown. So why not get your boy's name in conversation, you know, and if nothing else, suddenly quite a few more people say, Junior Fa, who is that?
That's a good PR move. Gail would know.
Absolutely. You know, you get yourself in the conversation, and that might be as much of a victory as Lou needs right now as a few more of us are talking about Junior Fa. And he is absolutely well worth watching. He's again, one of the next generation on the rise in the heavyweight division.
Indeed. I think we're going to okay, I hear what you're saying about about Junior Fa in terms of Lou DiBella, but in light of the discussion that we had earlier in talking Shields, Hammer, Lou DiBella, let me just say that there is a women's world champion out there. I know you got one lady fighter in the fold, Raquel Miller, but you got one woman out there who is a current champion at super middleweight by the name of Franchon Cruz, who's not only a really good fighter in the ring, she's uber talented outside of the ring. She can really sing. She designs outfits, gets paid to design outfits for other fighters. So while I hear you talking about Junior Fa and applauding Shields, Hammer, why don't you do us all a favor and make make a move which seems to make a lot of sense and be very wise, and sign Franchon Cruz and put her on one of your cards, because she, more than just about any of these lady fighters who's current world champion, she deserves some shine. So do us all a favor and make that move. I'm just saying.
Thank you, Michael. Hook a sister up. Come on. Franchon Cruz DeZern is a powerhouse. She's the WBC super middleweight champion. She's based in Baltimore, so she's right there on the East Coast, Lou. And by the way, speaking of the Joshua sweepstakes, Franchon on her Twitter feed, and I think on her Instagram feed too tonight, said, hey, I've got an offer for you. Put Heather Hardy and me together in the ring against Joshua, because between us, we both weigh about the right total. You know, I hand it to her. That is funny. That is damn funny. So, you know, she's out there, you know, but it would be a tag team. It would have to be her and Heather to make over 200 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying she's kind of a star in waiting, not just because of her talent in the ring, but because of her personality and many talents outside the ring. And again, Rudabella, I understand you want to put Junior Fly up there, but do us a favor in light of the discussion that we just had. Please sign her up. She deserves it. She deserves a deal. She deserves to be on. She deserves to have some power and some pull behind her. I'm just saying, and I think we're going to start to shut the show down on that note. I'm going to go to Francis first. Francis from Four Boxing News. For those who want to talk the sweet science or anything else, and for those who don't know, Francis, she does train. She does spar in her home in the Chicago area. Uh, Paralegal by day, fighting lady by evening. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Yes, you can check me out at 4boxingnews.com. That's the number 4boxingnews.com, or Twitter at 4boxingnews.
And Gail from Communities Digital News, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk Game of Thrones is back.
Oh my God.
Dancing with the Stars, small media and media advice, small business and media advice, excuse me. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Speaking of Dancing with the Stars, I think now that Andre Ward is a ESPN employee, which is owned by Disney/ABC, they should be inviting him on Dancing with the Stars. I'm just saying. So, I'm gonna be all over him about that. In the meantime, you can find my regular column at Communities Digital News, which is COMM Digi DIGI News, comdiginews.com. And hey, thank you to everybody who was listening, who asked us questions. I truly, truly relish having you all out there, and many thanks.
And again, thank everybody in the chat. Big Rotten Apple, he just had a recent comment that, according to Boxing Scene, Adakonaki's declined to fight with one Anthony Joshua. So that's a bit of breaking news. I want to thank him for joining us in the chat. Thank One Media. Thank Punch for Pound. Punch for Pound for joining us on the live show. If you are listening to us live on YouTube, please not hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. For those who are checking us out on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, please hit that subscribe button there as well. And if you're checking us out on iTunes, please leave a review. Reviews are always welcome. 5-star reviews will get read on the show. For those who want to talk boxing or music or fitness with me, you know what it is on Twitter. Brother JR on Twitter at Brother JR76. As I said to begin the show, if you want to find out all things regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, the blog page is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. That's the link. Check the top right of the blog page. You will find links to where to find us all over social media, as well as where to find the show on all available platforms that carry podcasts. On the next episode, we will do a recap of Terence Crawford, Amir Khan, of Shakur Stevenson, Christopher Diaz, Teofimo Lopez, and Edis Tatli, Danny Garcia, Adrian Granados, and we would do a preview of some really, really good fights that's happening the weekend of the 27th. The rematch between Srisa Katsor, Vasiliy, and oh gosh, the name escapes me right now. Gallo Estrada, Juan Francisco Estrada. They fought in February of 2018, one of the fights of the year then. In 2018, they're finally getting back in the ring on the 26th of April in Inglewood on the undercard of that. Junior featherweight or super bantamweight unification showdown between Danny Roman, who has the WBA championship, WBA belt. He's going to be facing IBF champ TJ Doheny, and also on that card, Jesse Vargas is going to be fighting, as well as Scott Quick. That's going to be happening on the 26th. That's on DAZN, and on the 27th, also on DAZN, World Boxing Super Series tournaments. The semifinal of the junior welterweight tournament between WBA champion Kiel Relic. He's going to be fighting Regis Progress. On the undercard of that, WBO bantamweight champion Zolane Tete is going to be fighting WBA champion Nonito Donaire in the semifinal of the World Boxing Super Series bantamweight tournament. So we'll be previewing all those fights, also discussing any news that pops up within the week that we're off. So again, I want to thank Francis from 4 Boxing News, Gail from Communities Digital News. This has been episode 247 of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. Ladies love boxing, round number 4. I am your host, Michael. Again, we will see you next time. Everyone, have a good evening. Good night.
Good night.